President, I'll be brief. I know the senator from Tennessee would like to close on this matter. I think everything that needs to be said about the details of this deal have already been said. I do want to be recorded for history's purposes before I know what is going to happen in regards to this if it goes through. Iran will immediately use the money that it's receiving in sanctions relief to begin to build up its conventional capabilities. It will establish
Welcome back, Patriots. What if I told you a senator stood on the Senate floor nearly a decade ago and predicted exactly what we're dealing with today? Back in 2015, while Washington politicians were celebrating the Iran nuclear deal as a historic achievement, Marco Rubio issued a chilling warning. He said Iran would use billions in sanctions relief to strengthen its military. He warned they would fund terrorist proxies across the Middle East. He warned they would continue developing missiles. And most importantly, he warned the deal wasn't stopping Iran's nuclear ambitions. It was delaying them. At the time, critics mocked him. They called him alarmist. They said diplomacy had won. But years later, many Americans are looking back at this speech and asking a simple question. Was Rubio right? Because what he predicted wasn't subtle. He laid out a roadmap of exactly what he believed would happen if the deal moved forward. And today, his words sound almost impossible to ignore. Watch this.
It will establish the most dominant military power in the region outside of the United States, and it will raise the price of us operating in the region. They're going to build anti-access capabilities, rockets capable of destroying our aircraft carriers and ships. Continue to build these swift boats that are able to come on us, these fast boats that are able to swarm our naval assets. And they'll make it harder and harder for U.S. troops to be in the region. They'll also work with other terrorist groups in the region to target American servicemen and women. And they may or may not deny that they're involved, but they will target us and raise the price of our presence in the Middle East until they hope to completely pull us out of that region. They'll also continue to build long-range missiles, missiles capable of reaching the United States. Those are not affected by this deal, and they'll continue to build them as they've been doing. And then at some point in the near future, when the time is right, they will build a nuclear weapon. And they will do so because at that point they will know that they have become immune, that we will no longer be able to strike their nuclear program because the price of doing so will be too high. This is not just a work of imagination. It exists in the world today. It's called North Korea, where a lunatic possesses dozens of nuclear weapons and a long-range rocket that can already reach the United States. And we cannot do anything about it. An attack on North Korea today would result in an attack on Tokyo, or Seoul, or Guam, or Hawaii, or California. And so the world must now live with a lunatic in possession of nuclear weapons. And this is the goal Iran has as well, to reach a point where they become immune to any sort of credible military threat because the price of a military strike would be too high. And then they become an established nuclear weapons power. And never in the history of the world has such a regime ever possessed weapons so capable of destruction. Iran is led by a supreme leader who is a radical Shia cleric with an apocalyptic vision of the future. He is not a traditional geopolitical actor who makes decisions on the basis of borders or simply history or because of ambitions. He has an religious apocalyptic vision of the future, one that calls for triggering a conflict between the non-Muslim world and the Muslim world, one that he feels especially obligated to trigger. And he's going to possess nuclear weapons. This is the world that we are on the verge of leaving our children to inherit, and perhaps we ourselves will have to share in it. And so I want to be recorded for history's purposes, if nothing else, to say that those of us who opposed this deal understood where it would lead, and we are making a terrible mistake. And I fear that a passage of this deal will make it even harder for us to prevent it. And I hope that there is still time to change our minds, but here's the good news. Iran may have a supreme leader, but America does not. In this nation, we have a republic, and soon we will have new leaders, perhaps in this chamber, but also in the executive branch. And I pray that on their first day in office, they will reverse this deal and reimpose the sanctions and back them up with a credible threat of military force, or history will condemn us for not doing what needed to be done at this critical moment in the world's history.
Marco Rubio began by saying that everything that needed to be said about the details of the Iran nuclear deal had already been debated. But he wanted one final statement entered into the record. Not for politics, for history. Rubio warned that the sanctions relief built into the agreement would provide Iran with enormous financial resources. And he argued that money wouldn't be spent on peace. According to Rubio, Iran would use those funds to expand its conventional military capabilities, strengthen regional influence, and make it more difficult for the United States to operate in the Middle East. He specifically warned about advanced missile programs, anti-ship capabilities, and support for proxy organizations throughout the region. But Rubio's biggest concern went far beyond conventional weapons. He argued that the deal failed to permanently stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. Instead, he believed it delayed them. And to explain the danger, Rubio pointed to North Korea. He argued that once a hostile regime successfully acquires nuclear weapons, the entire strategic calculation changes. Military options become dramatically more dangerous. The cost of intervention skyrockets. And the world is forced to live with a threat that becomes much harder to confront. Rubio warned that Iran's leadership wasn't simply pursuing ordinary geopolitical goals. He described the regime as ideological, revolutionary, and motivated by beliefs that made traditional deterrence less reliable. Whether people agreed with that assessment or not, Rubio's message was clear. He believed America was underestimating the long-term danger, and he feared future generations would pay the price. Then came the most memorable part of the speech. Rubio acknowledged that the deal appeared likely to move forward despite opposition. But he reminded the chamber that America elects new leaders. He expressed hope that a future administration would reverse the agreement, restore sanctions, and pursue a much tougher strategy toward Iran. At the time, that prediction seemed unlikely to many observers. But years later, the debate over Iran, sanctions, regional instability, missile development, and nuclear ambitions remains one of the most controversial issues in American foreign policy. Supporters of Rubio point to ongoing